reach and range as before. That's hugely important. And then new sensors across the ultra-wide, the 3x telephoto, and the 10x periscope cameras. This new primary sensor setup though, I know we keep saying cameras are mostly software, and as far as the look and style of the photos, it absolutely still is, but the improvement to the stabilization is so important here. So when you go from a normal sensor to a super high resolution, 200 megapixel sensor, the fact is in these tiny smartphone cameras, the individual pixels are so small that individually they physically can't bring in that much light. So the camera does this thing called binning, where it combines the information from a bunch of adjacent pixels to form larger, more accurate pixels in your image. So you're not shooting 200 megapixels by default, it's actually binning 16 pixels into one, so you end up taking a 12.5 megapixel shot for normal photos, but each photo is theoretically more accurate thanks to its makeup. And then like I said, the stabilization performance on this new primary camera has doubled. It still rattles a little bit, but that means it'll correct up to 3 degrees of shake now versus the 1.5 from before. So here's kind of an example of what's happening. If you get a lens with really good optical image stabilization, like this one, that means it can correct from the movement in your hand much more, which means you can hold the camera stable for much longer, so it can leave the shutter open to collect more light and still get a sharp photo. So all of this is to say, Galaxy S23 Ultra photos, most of the time in most lighting, look pretty similar to last year. So if that's all you're looking at, just like normal side-by-sides, this is mostly gonna come down to the different software tuning. And there's a little bit more dynamic range than last year, but yeah, still top of the line while mostly avoiding looking too HDR-y. Photos are typically pretty warm from these Samsung phones, and they have a slightly punchier, more contrasty look than before. Still very much up the Samsung alley of like colorful and saturated, but it's an aesthetic that I can get behind, I really like. But on top of that, having this new sensor and optical stabilization means, one, you can shoot literally 200 megapixel photos now if you really want to. Now, this does accomplish the intended purpose of capturing much more of the finer detail in things like landscape. So if you plan on zooming in on the shot later, or if you're one of the 3 people on Earth who will actually print a smartphone photo, this should work, but you should also be aware that it's only really able to give you these types of results in excellent lighting, where a ton of light is hitting every individual little pixel. Anything short of that, and you're gonna get a lot of noise really quick. And there's also a really solid shutter lag as it churns out these massive 40, 50 megabyte files. Granted, this mode is mostly for things sitting still, like a landscape or a photo shoot, but worth noting. I think the better compromise is you actually also get a 50 megapixel mode, which kicks out still very detailed images that hang right with the iPhone's 48 megapixel Pro RAW shots in a variety of light. But now the files are 5 megabytes and there's a little less shutter lag, but there's still that improved detail over the normal bin shots and not as much noise. It's all about flexibility. Like the standard mode is gonna be the best for most shots most of the time, but you can always turn it up if you want to. And that's very much the same thing with the zoom. You see all the cameras on the back. Like any phone with 2 different telephoto cameras is gonna have the biggest range of good zoom performance. On this phone, anything past 10x is where it really shines compared to others. And you might have even seen my recent clip of taking a photo of the full moon recently, which seems to blow people's minds every time they see it. Wow. But you also can't forget about video too. This is improved video across the board with better processing, the new sensors, and the much better stabilization thanks to the better OIS. So this might be the best super steady mode I've ever seen in smartphone video. And the beauty of it being from optical stabilization is it works great in a variety of lighting, unlike, you know, some electronic image stabilization, which relies on having a ton of light. And on top of all of that, the 8K video on the smartphone is very usable. There are previous phones that have had 8K video. It's not the first, but I remember when they first got that capability, they'd always be at like 24 FPS because that's the most that they could churn out, which is not the right frame rate. So 8K 30, really good. And if you put it side by side with the 4K, you can actually see the sharpness difference if you really punch in. If you want a sample of this, the latest autofocus video I shot in my car is in 8K from this phone, and you can actually go watch it 8K on YouTube right now from the link below that like button if you want to. Oh yeah, and also don't forget about the better selfies too. There's a new 12 megapixel selfie camera in all these S23 phones, and while that number is lower on paper than the 40 megapixel selfie camera that came before it, it's better. It's just better. Rock solid proof that the megapixels don't matter. This selfie camera with the better software processing is very sharp, detailed, has nice color, doesn't flare too much, and also has a decently wide angle. It's not ultra wide, but not bad. So across the board, this is significant, an extensive improvement to the camera, especially the primary camera. That feels overlooked to me when people have been reviewing this phone. The one thing I still will complain about is there is still shutter lag, which is different from slow shutter speed. So like the time gap between hitting the shutter button and actually capturing the photo, it's still real, and it can still be kind of annoying even if you capture a crisp photo of the wrong moment. So like I said, it's more pronounced when you take the ultra high resolution 50 megapixel or 200 megapixel photos. You can't exactly do those in rapid fire. But if the question is, did they make a meaningful improvement to last year's phone to end up here? I would say between the new chip and the better overall performance and much better efficiency, which gets you huge battery life improvement, and the new cameras with the better sensors, better processing, but also much better stabilization, I would say yes. Not upgrade from last year's phone, yes, but they've actually made a real improvement. And then I don't really need to say too much about the rest because it's the same as before, which in the case of the best big phone of last year is kind of a good thing. Like all the other things that made this the best big phone are still here, and they're not minor things either. I haven't even talked about the A+ display, 1440p, 120 Hz LTPO, 1750 nits peak brightness. It's still awesome. Still has great speakers, still has very reliable software with a pretty good track record now of delivering software updates in a timely fashion for a while. The base storage has also actually jumped up from 128 to 256 gigs, and it's faster UFS 4.0 storage now. It still has the best stylus in a smartphone in the world, which might mean a lot more to you than it does to me, but you know, honestly, if I ever use it, it's nice knowing I can at any time mark up a screenshot or sign a PDF. And the list goes on. Great haptic motor, nice clicky buttons. It's all still here. This thing sets the standard pretty high. My analogy that I was making is it feels like the Porsche 911 of smartphones. Like if you're gonna charge $1,200 for a phone, it better set high marks all the way across the board, but it does. And it's pretty underrated, kind of boring, but it does. Now, if you want the S23 Ultra to look as improved as it actually is, I would recommend a skin from channel sponsor dbrand. Maybe something like this Damascus skin, which adds a lot of character where it would ordinarily be pretty blank, you know? My favorite one is a triple black. It is actually included for free when you pick up like any of the holographic colorways, so you can check them out at the link below. But, like I say, this phone is boring, and I think maybe understated is the better word. Like, are there gonna be other phones that come out this year that do one-up this phone in certain single categories? Yeah, 100%. Like there's probably going to be a phone with 120x zoom. There's probably going to be a phone with, crazy fast charging. This is only 45 watt charging. Do I wish this was better? A little bit sometimes. Is there going to be a phone probably with a much bigger, better, faster fingerprint reader? Yeah, probably. But as far as just like nailing all the marks across the board, yeah, this does it. Just as far as overall package, Samsung's software is settled. The screen is sublime. It's still the sickest stylus, and it snaps significantly smoother shots. It's sick. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.